tung kuljetës. Shkarko aplikacionin e bankës ProCredit dhe paguaj profi nëpërmjet telefonit mobil Android. ProCredit Bank, shumë profi.
Now it's time we start with, we open this edition of KosICT with our first keynote of the day, and a very interesting one as well. We'll get to hear about artificial intelligence and the future of work from Mr. Bernd Blumoser, the head of innovation at Siemens AI Lab, which he co-founded in 2017. Before I pass on the floor to Benno, I would just like to let you know that you can send us all your questions about the presentation, which we will have some time to answer at the end of it. Benno, the virtual floor is all yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Mirdita, io përshëndes per Semersish nga Germania. Yeah? My colleague told me to tell you this. I don't know what it means, but I'm happy to be here today and share with you some insights about artificial intelligence and the future of work from a Siemens perspective. My name is Benno Blumoser. I'm the innovation head of the Siemens AI Lab. And we are a small unit within the Siemens Cosmos that has the task to explore future potential of artificial intelligence, new use cases, new technologies, and of course also anticipate a bit what's the implications of AI for also beyond the single use case. So this is why I'm happy to be here today and share with you some insights. My presentation will have basically two parts. In the first part, I would like to go through some phenomenons about what is actually AI, how far is AI having implications on the future of work, and the second part is then a bit more what can we do about it, right? Is it something we just have to accept, or can we get active in that? So probably all of you, and maybe this has also been the reason why you asked me to focus on that topic, because it's a mainstream. It's really it's a very focused topic in the mass media to think about AI in the future of work. There are a lot of press coverage out there. Is it a concern? Shall we be concerned? Is it an opportunity? Are we going to collaborate to work together with robots? Is my boss going to be a robot in the future? How about that? So a lot of fancy questions, a lot of hypotheses out there, a lot of uncertainties, and we have to somehow find an answer and a position on that very multifold question area. So to start with, well, why AI? Why does nobody talk about blockchain in the future of work, or digital twin in the future of work? When it comes to AI, there's some tendency that we always talk more about the values, about the normative systems behind this technology. We somehow have higher standards or higher requirements when it comes to AI. And I think there are a variety of reasons here. One reason probably is because we as humans, we always thought we are the crown of the creation, right? Because we are the intelligent beings. And this, our cognitive USP tends to be somehow threatened now by an AI claiming there's not only human intelligence, there's also that artificial intelligence. And this somehow collides emotionally with our expectations, and it makes us so concerned, and sometimes also makes us provoke some fears and uncertainties. Yeah, so it's about the term AI, but then of course it's also about what AI actually does, right? There are so many tasks AI takes over that hitherto have been can you see? Sorry, yeah, I see with a bit of delay. Okay, there's so many tasks that an AI takes over that hitherto has been taken over by actually humans, right? And of course we ask ourselves, okay, if an AI can now predict, recommend, estimate, and do all these things, what is left for us? So of course this is the second reason, and then the third one I think is that under the umbrella term of AI, there are so many really different capabilities, so many different use case types, but that we have to classify the structure a bit and give some orientation. Okay, what's actually AI? And we always work with a capability framework that consists of 7 different AI capabilities, and that these are, as you will see, hugely different one from another, right? You can cluster them in 3 basic impact areas. And I would now go through that step by step before we then answer the question, okay, what can we do about it? So the first bunch of AI use cases is related to AI driving and making the world more transparent, be it by providing large-scale monitoring skills, by analyzing and detecting anomalies of, for example, satellite pictures or camera images and so on, or by profiling of individuals. That's probably the single most profitable use case in the world right now, right? If you can profile an individual in terms of what's his or her preferences, what's his or her inclinations, buying inclinations, then of course it's a very profitable use case, business case, to match the corresponding advertisements to that. So making the world more transparent on a global scale, but also on a very personal scale. This is where the first 2 capabilities are about. And if you think of how many cameras are installed, this is more exponential than the development of the COVID virus, right? You have 760 million of cameras installed as of today. 54% of these cameras actually are in China, but that also means that almost half of it are outside China. So it's not just one country phenomenon, it's all over the world. They expect that next year we will reach the threshold of 1 billion installed CCTV cameras in the public space. Then the second thing, as I said, profiling of individuals. Of course, you have that business case. You might think about it as ethically questionable, but it's still legal, right? What Facebook and Google does. But there are other things that are much more spooky. If you think of there are AI solutions, AI technologies claiming that they can actually discern and predict the sexual tendency of a person from its biometrical data. So, and if you have a look on the other hand side on the landscape, okay, where is homosexuality, for example, under death penalty? That's really a very serious thing. And there are a lot of questions still whether this specific case is actually has really succeeded. There are a lot of experts discussions about it, but still that profiling of individuals is highly powerful feature of AI, and we have to be very careful. And what means to be careful? Well, one approach which I highly appreciate is that of inverse transparency. Why not defining it as an overall principle that these insights from our personal data shall, as a first step, also benefit our personal performance, so that it empowers us, having such an AI as a sparring partner, as a coach, maybe even, helping us to unleash our full potential and not letting others monitor our inclination, our preferences, but having that as a personal feedback monitor. That's what many call with inverse transparency. So this is in the end the 2 sides of the coin, right? Is it AI-driven coaching? Do we have that AI sparring partner, or is it about surveying employees on the other hand side? By the way, this picture is from a Siemens control center. They don't survey employees. We don't have a corresponding picture because it's in Siemens. Cosmos is always about machinery, but you get the point, I think. A second big bunch, right, is about machine autonomy. AI driving, for example, autonomous physical systems, cars, rail-related vehicles, and so on. But we start with another thing where AI actually can unfold its potential. It's self-learning gas turbines. It's reinforcement learning on machinery, right? Finding the optimal set point in the parameterization of, for example, gas turbine. But of course, you can apply to many other systems also. But this is something we as Siemens have already been doing for more than 30 years. It's one of the AI track record use cases we have been doing for quite a long time, even before it was called AI. So an AI helping here to parameterize these gas turbines based on varying context variables, right? The atmospheric variables, the weather conditions, the fuel composition. There are many things that are somehow varying over time, and the machine has to adapt to that context and thus optimize the outcome in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of NOx emissions, and so on. And this is a job that, of course, no human had been doing before, because that's not typical things where we human are good at. So this is not substituting any job, but this is where AI can unfold its true potential. And the combination with the human capability is here. In the humans are the ones who define the limits of authority. Where is the AI allowed to actually execute its algorithm, and where do we set a deliberate limits? Because an AI should not, because we have to make sure that, for example, there is no obfuscation of that of the material and so on. So then, when we think about machine autonomy, of course, there are all these fantasies about general AI taking over general cognitive jobs. I'm here now to maybe ease your concerns on that one. For example, we have Pepper. That's the very cute, to be honest, robot, which is working in the island. And we thought we have such a role-based system. I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. And Pepper was set to fulfill the role of the junior island concierge, right? But soon we had to admit that maybe it's overwhelming Pepper, maybe it's not the right thing. So we give him a second role, which is the chief singularity fear taker. Because after a conversation with Pepper, you lose any fear of soon AI taking over control over humanity. You really get to know, okay, this is far away. But nevertheless, of course, the powerful use cases when it comes to machine autonomy are in, for example, autonomous cars, as you see here, and in a lot of tiny robots. I don't know who of you have, for example, these cleaning robots at home. They're not as fancy as that one, but who take over specific tasks, right? And now you have two perspectives on the topic. On the one hand side, you might say, wow, I can use my time in the car differently, or I don't have to clean my house. So that's great that AI takes over here, that the machine is autonomous and can fulfill these tasks. On the other hand side, maybe there are people who rely on these jobs, even if they are autonomous and even if they are repetitive and boring, but it pays their bills at the end of the month, right? So it depends on the perspective, whether you can react on that disruption of these markets or whether you feel as a victim of this. And we have to take that into mind, to have that in mind when in the following steps. So then the big bunch is about human augmentation. AI is here to provide the right piece of knowledge, to provide the right piece of recommendation to us, to even support us in our creativity process, or to take over some repetitive task that I don't want to care about, right? Human augmentation in everything we do, or in almost everything. Some examples from the industrial space I brought with me today. Colleagues at Siemens Healthineers, for example, they have that beautiful vision that someday we will have digital twins of patients, right? A personalized medicine manifested in a 3D scan of each one's body, plus additional attributions, for example, your medical track record, things like that. And this digital twin is then can be used to actually recommend any personalized therapy or predict any illnesses and so on. This is a vision. We are not yet there, but we are at a stage where we have digital twins for parts of our body, for example, for organs. So if you think of liver cancer, right, that's a very common disease, and one of the therapies which you have there already for some time is thermal ablation. So you apply needles into your I go a step back so you apply needles into the cancer of your organ and heat them through electricity. And you want, of course, the tumor to be killed, but nothing else than the tumor, right? The healthy issue should not be touched. And then you can think of different variables here. You can the angle of the needles you put into the tumor tissue. The amount of electricity you put into, so the heat that is generated through the electricity and so on. Maybe the depth, the duration, and you have a lot of variables, and you can simulate different settings up front on the digital twin of that organ. And you can pick the best one, the optimized one, and then apply it on the real patient. And this is a pattern that is highly promising, that is highly also disruptive when it comes to, okay, how can we increase the success rate of these operations? And this, of course, augments the impact, positive impact that, for example, doctors have in that field. And this is where augmentation really shows how powerful and how beneficial for humanity and for our health that is. Another very different case here from the industry 4.0 area is about garbage classification. There are more like return on invest cases, especially from the predictive maintenance side, where this is the killer use cases. But I like that one because it's at a strategic cornerstone of our journey as a society towards a circular economy, right? We have to solve that recycling part of the circle actually. This is why technology can help a lot, digitalization can help a lot, and we go to garbage. Garbage is not that easy. Garbage and the picture, the data you get from garbage is very heterogeneous. You have different garbage from installation to installation. You have changes over a seasonal effect, right? Think of Christmas. Think of COVID, all the masks that haven't been here for the last year. So the algorithm that somehow is able to classify that garbage also has to be trained again and again. And it has to be able to generalize over installations, which is a big lever for scalability of these solutions. And one part of this approach is that there is human-machine teamwork, that there's active learning. The algorithm gets better because there are people who actually correct it and refine it over time. And and this is not a one-time thing. The algorithm at some point is like perfect and then can substitute it to the humans. No, it's an ongoing teamwork because, as I said, it has to be retrained again and again. The model is shifting and the data is also shifting, and there's no final algorithm. It has to be continuously improved. So that's the second. I could talk about a lot more cases here. There's a lot of industrial use cases. We call it the digital companion. Just to name a few: generative design, creativity in the process, of course, all the predictive maintenance cases, and so on. So the so what here is, of course, also it helps us to make better decisions. If we are in a job, we can profit, we can benefit from that AI companion. But it might also overwhelm us a bit because our job tasks will differ, right? And we have to cope with that digital cobot there. So I hope this gave you a bit of an overview of where AI is standing from an industrial perspective. We have to have that classification to know what are we actually talking about. But of course, now it's about the so what, right? What does it mean for us? So we have understood what's the implications. Shall we just accept it? Shall we wish back to former times, like back to the museum, the good golden old ages? Of course not. So what we have to do is take deliberate actions on different levels. On a personal level, each of us can, of course, has to cope with it, can react and can proactively define things. On a company level and also on a political and societal level. And I will go through 4 recommended measures that can somehow help all of us to get along with it. The first one is like a hygiene effect, right? Before we start about talking about the opportunities of AI for the future of work, we have to make sure that there are no negative side effects, that we manage, that we mitigate the risks that come along. And you might have seen that from different sources. On a political level, the EU Commission has launched a set of 7 requirements when it comes to AI implementation. And many companies have done so. We have 2 years back, we've also launched that and also implemented that internally. That's a set of principles we see important in order to mitigate these risks that come along with AI. Some are very trivial and already covered with existing regulations. Think of data privacy. But you have, of course, to apply that in the single applications. So there are, we don't go into detail here, but one I would like to pick out because it's especially ambivalent, right? If you think of explainability, there are some claims that say an AI is always a black box, and you always have to make clear the correlations of each of these effects in the algorithm. And if you did that, really, then you would probably slow down, break down all innovative efforts because it's just too much effort. But you have, of course, on the other hand side, admit that there are that there are challenges, that there are is biases, discrimination in data, especially when it comes on to personal data. So we have to make sure that there's the right level of explainability per use case along the specific use case criticality. And this is not yet solved, so we all have to figure out what's the pragmatic yet safe approach on challenges like this. So once we have like managed that mitigation area, that hygiene factor, we can get about, okay, what shall we do? And this is a question that is, especially on a personal level, relevant now. What am I expecting? What can I develop as skills, and which skills do I have to develop? And I think it's two parts of the story. One is on the task level. Okay, what's the future jobs? What skills are required there in terms of what am I supposed to do? And what we call the next work. What's the jobs that are out there? And then also the soft skills on a very personal level. How am I going to work? What do I need as a prerequisite to actually work in these jobs? And that's two sides of the story. There's a common denominator, maybe a common public opinion already on. There are very few jobs that will really be substituted. McKinsey claims it's about 5% of all jobs that really will disappear somehow. But on the other hand side, there will be more than 50% of the tasks that somehow can be, in theory, automated. And we have to make sure that we redefine, for example, the jobs of these tasks. So there is that discussion on the top level of, okay, how many jobs are going to be substituted, are going to be destroyed, right? And on the other side, is it more or less jobs that will be new, that will be created through that AI trend? And I think it's obsolete the discussion, because you never know how many new jobs will be created. And I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. The really important thing is that underneath that, there are a lot of jobs that somehow will be affected. Well, there might be some jobs not affected by AI, but it's really it's really difficult to think about that. Maybe, I don't know, priests or kindergarten nurses or something. But even these niche jobs, you can think about AI also bringing some benefits, contributing to these areas. But then the big bunch of jobs will be somehow enriched, augmented, as we called it before. So you do the same things, but you do it more efficient, more productively, because there's an AI boosting your productivity. Or will be even transformed, that you, for example, that you don't focus anymore on the process steps, but you have an end-to-end customer relationship, because on each step you are supported by an AI. So from a certain level of automation on, you can then think about redesigning these jobs. And that's also, of course, an efficiency booster, but also requires readiness from the employees. And now just, I like that sarcastic cartoon. Of course, again, we are entering that question of, are we competing with an AI? What does it mean for us? And how can I be on the winning side of that? So you may know that framework from Kai-Fu Lee, or inspired through Kai-Fu Lee, who says, okay, there are different axes. There are two main dimensions where you have to think of an AI being superior or humans being superior. And we have to think along these axes on what's the perfect machine-man teamwork. Because we're not thinking about racing against the machines, but racing with the machines, right? And you can think about the cognitive axis. Of course, AI or IT in general can take over tasks that are repetitive, that are routines, and also the complicated ones. If you enter with machine learning, then it's also the complex ones. But then there's also a barrier for AI where it's really hard for these algorithms. And on the other hand side, the y-axis, you have that social dimension. Is there some passion needed? Is there compassion needed, actually? Empathy, all these social skills. And then on all four quadrants, you can of course think about, okay, the lower left quadrant, jobs will be substituted sooner or later. It depends maybe on the commercial viability. Is it really worthwhile investing here? But sooner or later, be it years or decades, this will be substituted. No question about that. Then on the lower left, the right side, you see human intuition unleashed, but because AI takes care of the rest, right? We can focus if we are scientists, economists, reporters. We can focus. I was really wondering where the CEOs here in that framework, but maybe also in that way. We can think about, okay, these guys are unleashing the core focus of where they bring their value at, because AI takes care of the rest. And the same pattern, of course, is on the opposite side. Here you have the human warmth with jobs like teachers, wedding planners, that of course benefit from the interaction between people, but also then can be accelerated, can be deliver better quality because they are relying on AI tools. And then even on that quadrant where you might assume, okay, this is where the humans still are at home. No, also here you can expect that there are bunches of work that can be delegated to an AI. And also here the purpose-driven humans, right? The entrepreneurs, the coaches, the social workers, also they will benefit because they can focus more on the core of their value adds and delegate the rest. So that's still the best study you have from the World Economic Forum from 2016. Okay, there are a lot of skills that will decline in importance, and on the other hand side, there are other skills that will raise in importance. And if you have a closer look here, creativity, emotional intelligence, empathy, these are all things where you, as a human, or we as humans, are delivering like deeper, more depth of our skill knowledge into the game. We are demanded with all of our human values, with all of what can we bring to the table. And this also exceeds the pure skill level, but it really requires some readiness. If you think of mindfulness and trends like that allow you to actually deliver, to unfold that true potential, only because you can manage yourself emotionally, because you feel ready, because you know what to do, because you have resilience in that new area of future work. So Siemens, as many other companies, has a lot of initiatives. If you see these painted letters, you can always assume, okay, this is somehow related to change management. It is. Again, new work and next work. There are a lot of initiatives. Siemens invests more than 300 million euros each year. Always has done that for trainings. Right. This is the reskilling, the upskilling. In addition to that, the Workers' Council in Germany has started a future fund, which is there to actually specifically for these colleagues who suffer from the disruptive threat, who can actually really bring them into new roles, into new also to skill them up to a level where they can find new opportunities within the company. So there's a big invest. Not only Siemens, many companies do that, and I think it's important that this is done. But the third thing, purpose centricity, and that has a lot of facets, and we may focus on the most important ones. So if we have a new generation of job seekers, of applicants entering the job market, we get to know every day that they have a different level of requirements, of expectations when it comes to jobs. Gen Y, Gen Z talents have their purpose very much in their focus. They want to have their personal values from their private lives also to find them reflected in their jobs. And they want to work on tasks where there is such a purpose, and of course where it's a purpose that somehow resonates with what their value set is. On the other hand side, that concept of a purpose also helps us to find our own orientation, because we live in a VUCA world, in a very volatile, unclear, changing world. And if we know why we do things, it's much easier to find an answer in the specific situation of how we do things and how we should decide. So that's the concept of the purpose. And then, of course, also managing through that concept of purpose, and we will see that in a minute, also gives us some better ways to actually delegate in a digital leadership style autonomy to our employees and to our teams and also to our partners. So just quickly run through the example of how we do that at Siemens. At the Siemens AI Lab, we start, of course, with a big Siemens purpose, which is we make real what matters. But that's quite a big claim, right? So we have to find our niche as the Siemens AI Lab in that. We initiate innovation activities for responsible industrial solutions at Siemens. That's the intersection of two deliberate scope limitations here. And this is where we find our purpose. Now, this is a very theoretical discussion, but it becomes practical when we define from that level what's the things we actually offer, right? We started, for example, with acceleration sprints. It's one project type where we saw there's a big demand and we can deliver on our purpose, which is initiating innovation activities. So we invite partners, customers, peers within the company and outside the company and run 1 week sprints to actually validate or falsify an AI use case hypothesis. We try to discern the trend from the hype. That's like our bread and butter approach product, how we do things. And it is derived from the top level of the purpose because it fully contributes here. And the other thing, maybe the orientation workshop, it's the same thing. If people are not that ready that they already have an AI use case hypothesis, they start a bit early and we help them to get oriented. Okay, what is AI and what could be my personal use case? We have workshop points. So just as an example, I just want to tell you, okay, this is a logical cascading flaw. And then on the next level, we can operate it. Because from these products, we then define, okay, what are the roles that we as a team have defined in order to be able to manage this properly. And in order to react on the fact that our employees, our team, each of them is a smart person and can decide many things on her or his own, right? And we don't have, as from a management perspective, need to define the task of everybody, but we have these roles, and each of these roles has one purpose statement. So the person, from the student to the senior colleague, knows how to actually fulfill that, or can decide him or herself how to fulfill that purpose statement. And this is starting to become really effective. We are also gaining employee attractiveness because people like working that way, that autonomous way. Of course, each role also has expectations, interfaces, artifacts. It's not anarchy, but it's a deliberate delegation of autonomy in that role. And this year, I mean, actually 2020, we've really experienced that Corona and co-location, which is normally our key way of working. Corona and co-location do not fit that well together, to be honest. So that was really an external shock in March. And we had to reinvent ourselves. I mean, beside all the private things and the family and the societal things, also we as a team, as an economic unit, had to reinvent ourselves. And there were a lot of uncertainty then, but that was exactly the moment of time where that role-based, purpose-driven system helped us because colleagues came up with solutions. Okay, why not coming up with a podcast series? That was one of the ideas, right? Because our communication lead, which actually was a student, she thought that through. Okay, reflected on her purpose and said, we have to react in, and it gives me the freedom. Let's come up with a podcast series. This is something we can do in COVID times, and it contributes to the purpose. And this was really the moment of time where I experienced, okay, there is a really potential in how adaptive, how resilient these systems can be. So the last point is just one message I want to leave here. We've spoken many times about the perspective, right? And I think it's crucially important to leave no one behind in that massive transformation triggered by AI on the future of work. There will be winners and there will be losers. And we have to make sure that this is not really dividing and separating, but that it's that there are ways that also those who are suffering, who are the victims of that transformation, that they have a perspective, that we support them on a personal level, of course, that's a logical thing to do, on a company level, to invest really in the whole tribulation, and also, of course, on a societal and political level. And I think we are not yet there, even in Europe. And this is the last message I wanted to leave. And finally, also when it comes to AI and the future of work, I think we always tend to overestimate, and this is not my thing, that's the famous law of Amara, to overestimate the short-term effects. Right? We have a proof of concept, it will scale, it will be huge return on invest and so on. But we underestimate the long-term effects. And that might not be the direct ones in that specific use case, but there might be the effects, for example, on culture, on future on work, and so on. And with that, I want to close here, not without telling you that Faliminderit shum you pershendes. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Benno. That was such an interesting presentation. You touched on quite a lot of different points. I guess our audience was kind of stunned and we don't have any questions to follow up with. So I'm just going to use this opportunity to thank you for your time and thank you for all the insights that you shared with us. We truly appreciate it. Again, thank you. We'll continue very shortly with our next panel discussion, the first panel discussion of this edition of KosICT. So please stay tuned and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.